Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Interlink podcast, an initiative under the Center for New Economic Studies at OP Jindal Global University. Interlinked aims to hold nuanced conversations on the interdisciplinary nature of problems plaguing the world today. As we hold conversations on the socio political climate, we want to break down these intellectual barriers and look at topics in a way that allow us to question them from several facets. If you are listening us to the first time, please do have a look at our previous works as well. Today's episode is part of a mini series in collaboration with the History and Culture Cluster of Nickel and Dimed. Nickel and Dimed is the official research platform for CNES at OP Jindal Global University. It serves as an open academic forum and offers well researched, balanced commentaries on critical, economic, political, social, and legal issues across 7 research clusters. We are joined today with Ms. Apurva Lakshmi Kaipa, also a law student at Jindal Global Law School and a team member of the History Cluster. Apurva, I leave the floor open for you to introduce yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Apurva Lakshmi Kaipa. I'm a second year BBA LLB student. I love reading and I love doing paintings. I like drawing, and something that I really also like doing is writing, and hence I'm a part of Nickel and Dime. I write for the History and Culture Cluster, as you mentioned, and I really like writing for history and culture because I get to understand why things are the way they are right now in the present because of all the things that have happened in the past. And one thing that I feel really strongly about was when I wrote about pink tax in the past and how it has evolved to be. And now we learn to see how gendered things are, and we get to know a lot more about how we have come to this capitalistic state.
All right, welcome to the podcast. In our first episode, we explored how the word gossip transformed from gossip and later turned into a weapon used inter alia to silence women's voices in the medieval Europe. We traced the power of oral networks, the gendering of informal speech, and the ways women's knowledge were systematically devalued and dismissed. Today, we move forward into the 20th century. Between 1900 and 2000, the world experienced two, almost three world wars, the collapse of empires, the birth of mass media, the rise of cinema and radio, nuclear terror, decolonization, and the creation of modern celebrity. It was a century packed with upheaval, speed, and uncertainty. And in that intensity, gossip and scandal did not sit at the margins of history. They moved from local rumors to national spectacles. For the first time in history, a person's reputation could be constructed or destroyed by industries specifically designed for that purpose. From newspapers and radio broadcasts to colonial bazaars and Hollywood studios, gossip became a tool of power, a language of fear, and a method of resistance, and a way societies made sense of the rapid change. So, Purva, tell us, what did gossip actually mean in the 1900s?
I think gossip stopped being just a small informal speech, and it is something that's just a conversation between two people and became more of a public, mass mediated force. It didn't travel between persons, interpersonal relationship, but traveled through newspapers and radios and the film magazines and tabloids that just kept growing. And till now, we see the growth of them. And crucially, what they basically is that information that felt personal and which could hold moral judgment, which was now transmitted to a lot more people than it used to be in the past. Now, in the past, like you were speaking in the previous episode, it's mostly a word of mouth where gossip goes. But now we're seeing it being published into newspapers, which is supposed to be a place where it's factual, it's things that have happened. But when you bring in gossip into these spaces, which are edited and made for the mass media, then we see how gossip gains scale and authority. We see how a rumor printed in a newspaper will feel more real than just someone whispering something in your ear, right? And now, even if we're speculating about these things, it will still feel like, okay, there is some backing because this person wrote it in this magazine or in this newspaper. So that's why when you hear about some wars that have, or some deals that are going to happen between nations, first through just a small newspaper clipping, you try and think that, okay, maybe this is not going to happen. But when you see that these have actual backing, now gossip, I think we'll get to this, but gossip can be something that's factual, but sometimes you just can't prove that this is real, right? So now I think in the 1900s, it became less of trivial talk, but more of like bringing emotionally charged information into the industrial spaces, which brings gossip into a new ballgame.
So, if you had one major 1900s scandal where gossip played a very decisive role, which one would you choose and why would you choose that?
I think the Zimmerman telegram is something that I would talk about because it's something that's, I don't think it's very talked about a lot, but it is basically just like one small telegram that was leaked to the public about how the US relations, and which basically made the public force the government to start in a war, right? So now it began as a rumor. It was like, oh, this can't be possible. This is only in print. This is not like real. But it literally, a piece of gossip changed how the like life panned out for a few years, because we see how like gossip became like geopolitically like charged with this one thing. And I think that's a pretty good enough reason to believe gossip.
Right. And one thing that I've often found myself asking when I read about something that includes gossip or it feels like gossip is how do scandals start? Like, who's the first person to spread the rumor or who's the first person to capture it? Like, how does it begin?
Yeah, I think when we're talking about uh, gossip that's circulated in the masses, it's not like one like dramatic leak that happens, right? It's not like one person who like spill the beans to the public. It's more like you hear a lot of people in like political offices or like people in newspapers who have connections speaking about this, and then that is brought up in a newspaper setting or in a magazine setting where people are writing about these things. So then they pick these small things up, make it larger, make it more of an emotional thing, make it more of a moral thing where the public feels like they have a say and something that they can judge. So it becomes a way for them to sell more in the end, right? That's what newspapers or tabloids want. But I think when you talk about scandals, a lot of the scandals, like political scandals or even in the films, it's not like someone like randomly spilled it, right? Someone saw something, studio workers or like assistants and neighbors and secretaries, they all hear about these office talks and then like, oh, this person is saying this person. How it's the crew, right? It's the crew that they talk in their private spaces. And now that goes into media institutions. And like it's just that small change from like, oh, it's just a whisper, it's just like small talk to like becoming headlines, which like sometimes ruin people's careers. So I think that's usually how scandals begin.
So I've heard a lot of people say that what media companies do is that they have a lot of journalists who in every district in every city, right? And what they're responsible for is to collect stories out of their surroundings. Do you see any similarity or difference between these journalists and investigative journalists and spies? Because the moral reasoning given behind each of their careers is that they're serving the nation. They want the public to know, they want the public to be safe. But when it comes at a cost of destroying somebody's personal life, and as you said, that it comes at a point where the public feels that they're entitled to know about the personal life of somebody who is a public figure. How do you justify, roles and careers like this? What do you think?
I don't think there is a justification for jobs like this, right? The fact that this is a job and people are getting paid for it, that like tells a lot about how we are functioning as a society. But I feel investigative journalism, in the sense of society or the way the government is working, is very different from when we're talking about private lives of people, right? Because when we are talking about like geopolitical scenarios or stuff like that, I think investigative journalism can work because a lot of the times the general public has no idea about what's going on. And most of the times, like the government like will not share that information with us. Maybe for good reason, maybe not. But sometimes, I mean, I feel like in a democratic republic, you are entitled to a few, at least a little bit of information about what's going on. But when we're talking about like personal lives, even if they're public figures, I don't think, and I think most people think this, but people don't act on it. But you're not entitled to any information that they don't want to share. If even if they're sharing, a lot of times you put things out with the notion of already of that, okay, this is going to be judged by like 10 million people, and I'm going to put things out only when I know that this is morally correct, or it won't be judged, I won't be cancelled for this, stuff like that. And when people dig further without that person's consent into their lives, I think this is like, that's where I would draw the line on where you call it investigative journalism and just like spying, or just like at that point it's harassment, I feel. Because especially in celebrities, like I think in the 20th century, 21st century, it's better because you have a little more like laws. But in the 1900s, you really didn't. Like anyone could say anything about you, and people would not care as much. Like people would be like, "Acha, okay, this is something that's happening," and then they would move on. But that person's career would be destroyed, especially when they're a woman, right? So I think calling it investigative journalism is a stretch.
But do you really think that we're in a better place in this century than the previous one? Because right now we're surrounded by technology that works even when you're sleeping, and in case you're absolutely unaware, it softwares like Pegasus and all these technological changes that have creeped up into the personal lives of people, do you really think we're in a better place than the previous century? Because at least for your information to be published in a newspaper or a tabloid, it required people actively searching or actively listening for it. And I mean, I think you still had some chance to escape the public
Hmm.
scrutiny by living as a simple middle class man. But what about in the 21st century when you have,
Cameras all over
I mean,
you.
I don't want to name names, but like you have a lot of eyes on you, all eyes on everyone, with how the landscape has extremely changed. So I mean, I would argue that we are not in a better place at all. I think we need to go back. We need to stop.
I mean, I mean, now that you say it, I get that. But I'm thinking more of the sense of like when you are putting things out. Because I don't think back then people were putting anything out, right? That like you were not willingly giving the public any information unless you were on like a talk show, which is like once in like a year, maybe, right? Right now, you're willingly putting out so much information because that's how you're making money, right? But the problem is uh, like you're right, like there are phones with cameras everywhere, you can never escape the public. But also I feel like in the sense of like laws where you could sue them, like there is a potential, like the governments are giving you, and like you can sue them, but do you actually sue them? That's like a completely different thing. Like the practicality of getting someone like liable, making them face the charges of the things that they've done is like not something that's really practical. But do we have the option to do it? No, at least, yeah, I feel so. In that sense, I guess.
Fair enough. So going back to investigative journalism, I came across this word called muckrakers. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Can you tell us what it means, how it came up, and how it was used in the 1900s?
So the term actually comes, I have, it's actually like, okay, Theodore Roosevelt actually used this term because it came from another term actually, and he used it to criticize journalists who are like digging through society's muck, and which is like corruption, exploitation, abuse, and everything. But he uses in a sense of criticism, but over the years it has come to the point where it's something that's viewed as something good because people are trying to like dig deeper, find the real truth, and give it to the public, right? Which is, it's basically like investigative journalism. It's like using, you're putting out the real truth in a very effective manner, which is most of the time like really emotional narratives. Like, you're like, sometimes people argue that it's like exaggeration, but you could also argue that like that's how things are in real life. Like, you don't have to exaggerate things to make it seem that this is real and this is important for the public to know, and this is what is happening. Like, these are the hidden things, these are what's going to happen, and that's where this term came from. But I think it has a lot to do with how the society has this feeling that you need to have a moral opinion on things, and you can and you will give judgments on everything that you come across, right? So this is something that like it builds on that. It's using that to give you a real narrative, a real story about things that happen and things that are important to people. So I think it's like a bit of modern journalism.
Right. So, if, for example, the result of an investigative, if the result of this work is something good, for example, the government has decided to pass a law. Um, do you personally think that it matters if some of these stories were exaggerated or made up, as long as the result that comes out of it is doing society good?
I think exaggeration to a certain extent is okay. Personally, I feel only then does like the big population actually understand the impact of these things. And I think that's the route exaggeration should take, not the exaggeration of facts. I think facts should stay the same. I don't think like you should like blow up the numbers for more people to like understand the extent of it. That is not something I would say is correct, even if the outcome ends up being good, right? Because what's the point of the outcome being good when the people were not supporting it with the right facts, right? Like, if you're supporting a cause for the right facts, only then is it that something good came out of that one thing. If it's out of like random things that you made up, like, what good is it actually, in my sense? But in the end, some good does come out and the public finds out that this was made up, then I think uh, you can weigh the pros and cons. But I usually, when I see news articles in the present day, I'm always going to Substack, seeing where those news articles are getting their data. Because most of the times when we want to see headlines, I think this was huge back in the day in like 1950s, where people would just like publish crazy headlines to just get more eyes, right? To get more people to buy that newspaper and read what it is from like the stamps or whatever. Right. So like in that sense, exaggeration was huge back in the day. Like to get like, oh, this person cheated on this person, or this government spent this much money for this project. Like it is most of the time an exaggeration and it's for the public good. But what good is it doing if the facts that you're presenting are incorrect, right? So, I mean, I don't know.
So, a related question of mine was that if you were a newspaper editor in 1930s, 1950s, right? What kind of scandal would you publish to increase your readership and sales? And since you've almost answered that question, what does that choice reveal about the society back then? What were the people more interested in reading about? What does it have to say?
I think the mid 1900s was when the women's movements were a lot more publicized. And at this point, it was seen as something more okay, right? Because in the 1800s, this is like you're being radical, you're like out of your mind. But in the 1900s, it became a little more like, okay, this is something that we could give women rights to vote, like something we can do maybe. So women's rights, women's freedom is something that's always a huge talk, even today, right? Like we will still talk about it. I still talk about it because I don't believe that women actually have the equality that we have on book in reality, right? But I think late 1900s is when modern sexuality, political legitimacy was being questioned. Cinema was a huge talk, and you could literally give a headline about cinema, and to this day, anyone will click on it, right? Right now, we'll click on it. Back then, you would buy that newspaper, that magazine. You'd see your favorite actor on the front page. You'd pick it up. I mean, I think like my mom still does that. Like my mom will see like when we go to the train station, she'll see like a magazine with her favorite actor and she'll be like, I need to buy that. I need to know what they said. So that is something that I would definitely capitalize on because especially if an actor is giving political opinion, that was huge in the 1900s because you would not have a filter right back then. Like you could just say whatever you wanted to say, and whatever the repercussions happened. Right now, you have like media training and stuff, but back then, like the political narratives that came out, because it was a very charged, like politically charged environment. Like wars were very, very actively going on, like they are even now. But back then, it was like a very common thing that wars just kept happening. It's just something that happens. So publishing like a scandal also was a huge thing, right? I wouldn't do that personally, but editors back in the day definitely did that. That was what got their sales. So like, but most of the time, all of this again ties down to the moral scandal, right? Of like modern behavior. You got the modern women and the traditional women, or modern society and traditional society. And that was always seen more of like even in India, it's more like a Western and then like Indian. So it is not modern, it's Western. This is Western culture, this is Indian culture. That became more prominent, I think, after independence that we got. But having that social change, that fear of like modernity, having that oh, there was the fear of like electronics taking over since like 19 like late 1900s, and you have that obsession with having the status of like social status. So that's also something that people covered a lot in magazines, where it is like, oh, this person fell off, this person lost this much money doing this film. Like it's always that belief of like morality is like policed by the public, and like I guess, yeah, so I wouldn't do that, me personally. But if you had like on gunpoint, if you made me do this is what would actually get the sales that the magazine would want.
All right, duly noted. Um, I think it gives me a very nice segue into the question that cinema built the first global celebrities. But how did it play out for women? Can you give us some examples on how women face the public scrutiny differently, and especially in India, if you could tell us some stories?
Yeah, so I think women are always this piece of like, you know, the dolls. Like you can just view them, you can hold them, you can view them, you can do anything you want, and they'll just be there. That's how women have always been looked at, right? It's always that women are a public property that you can view, you can scrutinize, you can do anything, their morals, their bodies, anything, right? Now, women were always like female stars in general. They're always like questioned and scrutinized over what they wear, how they wear what they wear, their relationships, what are they doing, like who are they with, why are they with them? Are they with someone of a higher status than they are? Why are they not with someone of a higher status they are? What is their sexuality? Which was a huge thing because sexuality was such a taboo topic, but at the same time, it was always on the front pages, right? Which is such a contradiction that till date, I'm like, how? People don't want to talk about this topic, but still, that's the first thing that you question someone about. That's the first thing that you want to morally police someone, right? Which is insane. And back then, like women didn't have independence, so if women are acting out of the line, I hate saying this, but women are acting out of the line. We need to police them, right? So these are the things that, especially when you're in a public light, people are able to see what you're doing. It is a huge thing. And in India, I think this semester in our gender, caste, and society subject, we had the story of, not story, but like a piece on Silk Smita, which I really liked. It's called, this article is called The Dirt and the Dirty Picture, which is about Silk Smita's the biopic that was done by Vidya Balan. Now, in this article, the author is like amazing. I love this article. Like, even in my exams, I quoted this article because it is such, I really like it because it brings in a lot of different uh, tones that you wouldn't normally think about when you're viewing actors, right? So in this, the writer talks about the intersectionality of like caste and the fact that she is a person of like she's not as fair as or she's from a lower caste. And when you are putting a person like this sexualized on screen, sometimes, and in this case, you are reinforcing those notions of like the lower caste people are available or people that you can use, right? That these are the people who can be sexually available. Now, an upper caste woman would not be portrayed this way. The upper caste woman would be the pure, like, oh, clutching pearls kind of person. And it's always the lower caste women who are portrayed this way. It's not bad to be portrayed this way, but the problem is that you're reinforcing caste hierarchies in these ways. And I think that was a lot of the problem with item songs in Indian movies, where it's mostly people of like lower caste or like people who you would assume was sexually available or someone you could potentially think about, right? That this is something that oh, I can, you always need to have the feeling of I can have this, right? When people are viewing media, that's something that uh, marketers like usually point on, like, oh, this is something that I could have, like it's in my reach, right? And it's always that these like some patriarchy again of like why is it item songs, why are they literally called item songs, why they objectified to the point where the songs are called item songs, right? Like it's broken down to such a level where you can't escape it. Women in this field, women in media, especially when you are sexualized on screen, you can never escape that. Like that'll, even if you become an amazing star, like Silsmina has like a record on how many movies she has done in a year. That's huge, but she will still be remembered as that one person who was in that one song, right? you're always brought down to that one small thing. You get your achievements are never looked at as real achievements, especially when you're a woman who's of a darker skin tone, who is of a lower caste. And I think that's something that I really wanted to talk about.
I'm glad you did. One dilemma that I think a lot of us face today, especially people of our generation, is that we do realize the problem in item songs. We do realize that the lyrics are absolutely insane to be honestly recorded and put out there, but you can't stop yourself from dancing to them anyways. You see them being played at clubs, you see them being played at weddings, you see them being played at any function where you want. And honestly, to have a good time, to party, you associate a good time with specifically these item songs, right? It's where a person's, I don't know what comes out when these songs are playing, but I've seen people who are naturally into introverts dance their hearts out to these songs. And I always wonder because I am a dancer, right? I grew up dancing. I was 3 years old when I started dancing. So I'm also guilty of dancing on these songs. But when I look at it objectively, and after having 3 semesters worth of gender, caste, and sexuality sensitivity, I always wonder when these item songs are playing, like, what is it about them that we keep going back to them, even though most of us realize that they're absolutely incorrigible in how they are played, right? So, like, I do not come up with an answer because when I think for me, the way that I mean producers have done a great job. I think we do not appreciate the producers anymore in this country or even worldwide. I think producers are a great backbone of the music industry, but it cannot be just the beats, right? It cannot be just we sing out the lyrics. We know the lyrics by heart. And uh, do we forget that they're problematic? And do we know that? I mean, how ignorant are we to still rhyme, to still. It's just a very contradictory
It's
question.
such, yeah, because there's, when you think about it, some of them are like banger songs, right? Like you hear it once and you will never forget that. Like I would not hear, like I'm not like going out of my way to listen to these songs like on the daily, but when I hear it play like for a festival or whatever, I know it. I know the hook step, I know the next lyric like on it. But I think you make that block at one point, right? Like when you have to live through this on a daily, you like make that block, you're like, okay, this is bad. This is not something that you should be consuming, but it's being put in front of our eyes and blasted in our ears. You consume it. And I think it's not wrong for us to like dance to the songs which have fun beats. But when these are the only songs with these kind of lyrics, with these kind of portrayals in the videos, and these are the ones that are being like the only ones which are like danceable to, and which are the ones that you can actually enjoy. I think that's where it's like, oh, why though? Like, why is it only these songs that are so catchy? These songs that have these videos where you will have like a billion views on YouTube, right?
I think
And
that I have a big problem with these music videos as well. Because, okay, let's talk about it. We know a lot of music artists that independent music artists as well, right? Mostly male, who have their music videos where they might be married, but they're still standing in next to a young bachelorette aged woman with like 50 female dancers behind them. Background dancers are great. That's not what I have a problem with. But what I have a problem with is when the artist is using the body of a young woman, even if he is already married, even if he is 40 years old, even if he is 50 years old, right? And I don't get why their wives aren't called in their music videos. Like, why wouldn't you invite your wife to be the the main model for your music video? I mean, the answer that I get from people my age is so concerning because what they say is it won't sell.
Yeah,
People want to see these
that's
women.
exactly what I was also going to say. Like, however, like messed up it is, that is the reality. Like, that won't sell. This will. Like, people will click on a young woman in front of a music video.
We see it
Not
in films too, right? Like we see it's okay for an aged male actor to be casted with a young female actress, but the other way around, I've barely seen that. I
when it's
think
the other way around, it's like huge. It's like this person is acting with someone 6 years younger to her. But like nowadays, it's like, what are you talking about, dude? Like people who are just getting out of their teenage years are being played like across like 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds. So how is that not a problem? Because it's accepted in society that men can marry younger women and it's seen as okay, right?
exactly like we had Priyanka pave the way for us, but like it's still such a rare occurrence, and I don't understand why. Because why? It's just what I'm left with. So do you think that we're bad people for enjoying celebrity drama and scandals? And like, is gossiping an inherent part of our human nature, or is it something that we learned?
I think so. Anthropologists usually say that gossip is like universal, right? Like you will never escape it. That is something that has become a part of society, that it's always been a part of society, that you will always have someone who will be like, okay, this person's bad, this person's good. Don't talk to this person will hurt you. This person will not hurt you. Now that is also technically gossip, right? But this is someone's survival. So how is that okay, right? But in the end, gossip, engaging in gossip is not, and like enjoying gossip, especially when it's mass, it's not like inherent, like completely wrong because you're consuming what the media wants you to consume. So it's not like you're going out of your way. But even if you're going out of your way and you're consuming it, when you're consuming something that's cruel in nature, I think that's where the problem comes in. When, like we were talking about earlier, right? Like these journalists who are going and like the paparazzi that like are taking photos where it's showing parts where they don't want to show, when they're taking pictures of the person like lying down and up, that's when it's a problem. Like when you have crossed all the lines of like consent, there are no boundaries whatsoever, and you're just gossiping about things where it's not giving you or them any kind of like, I don't even know at this point, like some kind of accountability, or you're not giving anyone the help that it needs. So like gossip was made, or like not made, but like gossip started because it creates that social bonding, right? It creates like that model, you create the moral boundaries, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. You understand social norms through them. Okay, this person is not good because they did this person is good because they did this. Okay, understood. Now I shouldn't do that, I should do this. But when it's mass, when it's such a huge scale, and mass media has removed that like personal connection of like you telling me something and I'm telling you something about my life, and that's our gossip, to someone we have zero connection with, we have no idea how they are in person, and you're not giving that person any kind of consent, and that person's not giving you any consent to know about this, that's when it's a huge problem. Nowadays, that's basically all the gossip you hear. So that's where the problem sets in. But gossip inherently, don't think it's that wrong.
Fair enough. So The newspapers in the early 1900s figured out that scandal obviously sells better than serious and boring news. And I think that's still the case. But back in early 1900s, did newspapers create our obsession with celebrities' personal lives, or were they just giving us and the people what they honestly wanted? Like what came first, the gossip or the audience hungry for it?
It's the chicken and egg thing there. It's like it's a cycle, right? Like you can't one can't happen without the other happening. It's just that constant loop of, oh, this celebrity scandal happened. People want to know what it's about. But people want to know what celebrities are doing in their daily life. So the scandal is happening, right? It's that constant loop of how can you even figure out what came first? But people have always been curious about public figures, right? The second that public figures emerged, when people could know someone, before it was like kings, right? Like the only public figure in the past were the kings, the ministry, and all of that. But once the mass media came up, and you have other people who are like celebrities, people were curious about what, like power, like who has the power, who has the wealth, who's beautiful, who is like morally right, who is corrupt, right? Now, obviously, newspapers also realized that it's not only like broad stories that will sell, it's also like personal stories. Like you are creating the investment into celebrities' personal lives. You're creating that emotional attachment. The parasocial relationships that we have with YouTubers now, those were created with actors back in the day, with newspaper clippings every like week about this one actor who was famous at that point. So now when you see as an editor, like you were asking before, you see the sales spike when scandals are being published. Why would you not continue searching for these scandals, publishing more of these scandals, right? Now, obviously, the audience had some curiosity, and the newspapers built onto it. I feel like they trained that curiosity to like happen in like particular lanes. Okay, this is something you're curious about. This is something you don't need to be curious about. But it's not actually that, right? Like it is something. Like for example, like what the economy is doing at this point. It's not like people are not curious about it, but why aren't the journalists publishing about that, right? It's because that's something you should not be talking about, because that's something that people like are not consented to talk about. But then why are the celebrities' lives and people, the public figures' lives, talked about so openly when even they haven't consented about it? So you find that this balance, horrible balance. But I think when mass media has like circulated this, they have accelerated the cinema, the growth of like you would go for a movie because you have that one actor that you like, because you have like 100 magazines of them, or like you've read stories or anecdotes of their lives with their parents, with their children, and you have that obsession now. And it's the system that monetizes obsession that now people are profiting off of sharing their daily lives on platforms now, right?
I think I remember my marketing professor say this, that the only reason Bollywood still has sales, at least during the last few decades, is because of the legacy that it has built for itself and not because of the actual movies that are being released, right? So, if you're ever caught in a scandal, how do you think you should respond to it? Like, should you apologize? Should you stay silent? Fight back? Like, first of all, how should you respond and how do you make it go away?
I think I watched one podcast or one video where Veerdas talks about this, where he was caught in a scandal and he says, just be silent. Like, don't talk for a week and the media will find another topic to talk about, right? Which I think I completely agree with. Most of the times, celebrities like dig a huge, like, if it was a den, they dig like a grave for themselves with the responses they give, right? So it's like most of the time, silence. It's like, be silent, get off the internet for a while right now. But back in the day, you like, even now, you can't really do that. Like, people will dox you, like, literally dox you and come up to your house and like make you answer. But denial has always made it worse. Like, if you say that, oh, I didn't do this, okay, but this newspaper said you did, so I'm gonna believe the edited version of the newspaper. Why will I believe you, who they say you did? So, I mean, it's not like suing someone will help it either, right? You have to have a control of the narrative. Now, how will I get the control of the narrative if I don't have power? You can't. Sadly, like if you're caught in a scandal and you don't really have that much power with you, you can't do anything but just like try and deny. If denying doesn't work, be silent, like do something else to your life for a while and then come back. And usually that's what works, because when you're caught in something wrong and you've done something wrong, then you're like, oh, then I think there's a lot of times where you can actually get back better when you've done something wrong and you accept that you've done something wrong and then do something to like negate that. That's usually the best thing that you can do is, okay, you double down. You say, okay, yes, I did do something bad. Now I'm gonna like fix this. How do I fix this? Blah blah blah. I do XYZ and I get it resolved. But all the time, just handle, just stay silent.
So I'm not sure how well it would turn out for a politician to stay silent, right? Because they have to make public appearances, they have to speak, they have events lined up throughout the year, throughout their career. But so this leads to my another question is that in this century, gossip, like in the 20th century, gossip transformed from informal social communications into a very mass media industry that could elect politicians, destroy careers, create laws, and generate massive profits, among many other things, right? That's a lot
Mm.
of power concentrated around something we're taught is trivial and unreliable. If gossip has been this powerful for over a century, why do we still pretend it doesn't matter?
I think when we call these things trivial, it allows these like institutions with power to like avoid that accountability, right? When we say that, oh, this is just gossip, these are just rumors, these are not true, you have a possible deniability that you have, which you can't when you like when you portray that gossip has power. You remove that. You can also like very easily dismiss marginal voices when they come up. You can like remove the rumors, remove the gossip. Yeah, ye to koi nahi hai. This is not something that this is, so who is this person? Like, how can you like understand? How can you rely on this person's voice and not ours? You know, and I think that's a huge part in politicians where it's like when someone like talks that, "Acha, this person is not good," you have that thing of like, oh, but who are they though? Who are they to say I'm the person in power, so I know what I'm talking about, right? And it's also that you have that sense of like respect that we always have in the society, right? So you can hide behind that respect. You can hide behind the, by calling it meaningless, you can say that you can use it as a political move. You can use it as something that can work in your favor, which is usually when people are in power. You can use it in your favor and against someone else when they don't have as much power as you do. And usually that's when, like when we have seen even historically, a lot of the political movements that have happened, especially in India during independence, before independence, that period, it always mostly happened through word of mouth, right? Which is what? Which is gossip. You find out that, acha, now, okay, this person, this freedom fighter is coming to this place at this time. So we need to find a way to make sure that other people, like the Britishers, don't find out, the police don't find out. How do we do that? And now that's the form of gossip that's built on. So when you give gossip that power, when institutions give gossip that power, it takes away all of these other things that they could do that they can't deny this real factual thing now because it's not real and factual because this is just gossip. It takes out that credibility from it. So I think that's why it still continues to be trivial.
Right. I think this brings us to the last question for this second episode. And the question I had was that something that struck me a lot while reading about the 19th century and gossip was that this era professionalized the act and practice of gossip. It went from something ordinary people did to something experts manufactured in studios and newsrooms. They learned how to make sensational headlines. They learned how to create obsession around the celebrity, moral panics, investigative exposes that mix fact and emotions a lot, right? A century later, and we're still doing that, and arguably even better. Does that mean we've learned the wrong lessons from this era, or are these patterns just inevitable in mass media?
I think when we say like we're learning wrong lessons, it's not that we learn the wrong lessons. Oh my god, it's tongue twister. Sorry. We didn't learn the wrong lessons. It's just that the media companies understood how profitable emotion was, right? That when people publish on like outrage, on like intimacy, on scandals, that's what is rewarding to these companies. That when you see from 1900s to 2000s, okay, it would take the night for the newspaper to be published, or a week or a month for the magazine to be published. So it would take time where people could at least have the opportunity to like take things back, re-edit them, right? Right now, the speed is accelerated to like 100,000 times, right? Because you see something, you immediately can post it. Like there's not even a second thought that goes behind posting something. Now, this could be rumors, right? This could just be you seeing a celebrity doing something in the public. You take a picture, you post it. No consent, nothing. But that's something that like we can't even do anything about, right? Because this person has these rights or whatever. But when we see that the structure of it in the core has not changed. It's just that when it's accelerated to such an extent, we can't deny it. We can't like leave it aside and move on with our lives. And I think when a lot of the like huge scandal back in the day was like Marilyn Monroe and JFK, right? This was such a huge scandal because it brought together the cinema and politics, right? It was two huge figures that almost everyone knew about. And now this was a huge scandal. Now all it's all speculations about what happened after or before or whether this even happened. But this became such a huge thing because media understood that okay, this is a person, both of these people are people that the public wants to know about. The public has immense curiosity on what is going on in their personal lives because one, president, and two, it's like a huge movie star, right? So now when we have these two huge figures have a scandal, which we have no actual relation. We don't know whether what happened. These are just like whatever the information that we have right now. It's because the public understands that okay, this is something huge, and they are connected to these people because of other tabloids. They feel that emotional connect with these people is why this again becomes such a huge thing because it again like I was talking about it's a circle, right? Like if we didn't care about it, media wouldn't push it on us. But if the media didn't push it on us, we wouldn't care about it either. So it's again that huge thing of like when these patterns are inevitable at the end, because you will always have someone that a scandal is published on or someone that is cancelled in society. And you can't really do much about it except hope that we won't have it again.
I think that's a dying hope, honestly, now that we are in the 21st century. But that is a conversation we will save for the next episode, in which we will talk about similar ideas and concepts and problems and questions that we're facing in this current century, right? I think that was a great end to this episode. It was lovely talking to you, Apurva. I had great fun. I had a lot to learn. And I hope everybody who joined in and stayed till the end also felt similar. Please tune in for the last episode of this mini series when it comes out. And take care. Good night or good morning.